Joining me today is Joe Farchaus, who's a pewter smith at the League of New Hampshire Craftsmen. Joe, thanks so much. Did I get your name correct?
Absolutely correct, yes.
And pewter smith.
So it is a craftsman that works with pewter. Pewter has been around since the time of the Egyptians.
Oh, that?
Yeah, since 2000 BC or more. The Romans also used a lot of pewter. Of course, in those days, pewter consisted mostly of just tin and lead.
And what's it today made out of?
Well, now, since about 1650, people began to realize that the lead in the pewter was not really a good idea. So they took out the lead altogether. And pewter nowadays, the composition can vary a little bit, but generally speaking, the pewter that I use is about 92% tin, about 7% antimony, and about 1% copper. The tin gives you a lot of the properties in terms of malleability and so forth, but it's not a very hard metal. The addition of the antimony and the copper do two things. The antimony gives it more strength and durability, also allows you to bring it to a very high polish. The copper also adds to the malleability of the metal, but it is also very important in terms of the strength of the metal. Overall, pewter is a mixture of metals, so it's an alloy. And it's actually a pretty low melting alloy. It melts at about 450 degrees Fahrenheit. So you could actually melt it in your oven. So I always tell people when you buy something, don't put it in the oven, don't put it on the stove top, and wash it by hand.
So I mean, if I say, I'll just heat this up at the oven's 400, I may. Wow.
Right. It's one of the properties that, one of the reasons I think that the Romans and everybody liked this is
because it was easy to manipulate.
Yeah, it's easy to use. You can do a lot of things with it. And you know what? If you get tired of a piece, you can just clean it off, melt it down, and do something else with it again.
You could do that. I couldn't.
Well, yeah, it takes a little bit of
I might be able to melt it down, but doing something
you can melt it, yeah.
So how did you get involved, and how did you become a pewter smith?
That's an interesting story. About 12 or 14 years ago, my mother-in-law, Hetty Reamer, she was an artist. She was actually trained in art. And she worked in a number of different media, including pewter. And she was trained by Francis Felton, who was a very well-known pewter smith in Connecticut. She started to develop arthritis and had some trouble in terms of actually hammering or shaping the metal. So she kind of conscripted me one afternoon and said, hey, can you do me a favor? And she had me do some hammering for her, and she said, you're actually not too bad at this. I learned afterward it was kind of a, she intended to do that. Right? She was trying to pull me in. Right? But I got my start with her, and through that connection I managed to meet other well-established pewter smiths, and some of them acted as my mentors through the years. And they taught me techniques and showed me a better way to do things. And I'm also just the type of person that likes to try things and work out the technique. That's really my joy in crafts work, is doing something new. I get this sort of something in my mind's eye, and then it won't leave me alone. So I have to make that. And then the joy is really trying to figure out, now how in the devil am I going to do that?
So right? What's the most complicated thing that your mind's eye imagined?
Well, there have been several over the years, and I'm trying to tone that down because it's getting increasingly difficult. But one of the things that I made actually for the jurying process to become a juried master pewtersmith was a box, a round box. And that involved a large number of assembly steps where I had to, put pieces inside of pieces inside of pieces, and it had on the lid enamel. So it was glass on copper, and then I had to make the mounting for that. And when you're doing a lot of these things, resoldering is very difficult without undoing what you previously soldered. So it was really very tricky to do that.
So it was a really technical piece.
It was a very technical piece. Since then, I've invested more time. What I try to do is, rather than just cranking out the same thing over and over, especially like for this show and living with craft, I try every year, it's something totally new. Something that challenges me, something that's completely different. So this year I did, pieces that I worked on different hammering techniques and different finishes. I tried as hard as I could to make the metal come more to life. Just shaped metal can often just be cold and it doesn't have much feel to it. What I tried to do is actually manipulate the metal through hammering, and it does a few things. First of all, it really does soften it. Pewter is opposite of copper and silver. They work harden. Pewter will soften. So as you hammer it, it physically will get a little bit softer. So I try to draw it out, make it a bit thinner, and give it a different texture. That does two things. First of all, it makes the piece seem more subtle, more lifelike. But secondarily, it also gives you a way to manage the light off of the piece. So that the way the light hits it. The same thing when I engrave things, how I cut can also go ahead and make the light reflect in different ways.
So I mean, it's a real art, and people can see and come visit your studio, or not your studio, but your booth.
Yeah, I have material for sale here, yes. I'm also going to be teaching this fall at Concord. I'll be teaching an introductory course to pewter work. And
so if people want to know that, they can do that.
Yeah, I welcome people who have absolutely no background or experience in this, and somebody who just wants to try it, or they saw something that they liked and they'd like to give it a whirl. Come on, give it a try. We'll have some fun. We're going to do it collaboratively. It's not going to be a pressure situation. Yep. It's just fun.
Well, great. Thanks so much.
Oh, the pleasure was mine. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for this edition of Capital Connections, your weekly access to politics and policy along the I-89 and I-91 corridors and how it impacts our region. If you have a comment or an idea for a future show, please email me. And please join us again at this same time next week for another edition of Capital Connections.